Hello and welcome to Little Learners. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how you can talk to your child about the danger of strangers. Now, this is something that, of course, terrifies all parents, guardians and caregivers. Of course, there are lots of things that you can do to help your child to recognise a situation that they don't want to be in. There have been lots of videos circling the internet about people intentionally trying to get a child to go with them for an experiment. So the parent is involved, the parent says, "My child will never go with you," they know not to go with strangers. The stranger then goes in to see the child in a park or something. They'll use a buffer like a puppy and say, "I've got loads more puppies in my van, do you want to come and see them?" And pretty much almost every time the child went with the stranger, even though they knew that they're not supposed to go with strangers. And that's because there was this buffer of the puppy. Puppies are cute, puppies are nice, so this person must be nice, they've got a puppy. So it's really important that we teach children exactly what to look out for. Now, I do just want to take a moment here and say that the idea of stranger danger is actually a bit of a danger in itself. Not to say that you shouldn't teach children about strangers, of course you should, and we'll move on to that. In the 70s and 80s, the phrase stranger danger became very well known. It was the primary focus for a lot of educational videos and leaflets and programs, and parents all knew about it, children were taught about it in schools.
You've never met any of these people. How do you know whether they're good or bad? You can't tell by looking at them, and that's why you must say no to strangers. You know your mum and dad. You know your teacher. You know he's okay. But you don't know these people. They're strangers, so be careful.
However, that also came under a lot of criticism. In fact, in a report in 2013 by Action Against Abduction, the charity found that of all of the reported child abductions in the UK, 42% were made by strangers. So then when you think about it, 58% of child abductions that were reported were made by people who the children knew. So therein lies the problem with just talking about stranger danger, because it actually doesn't teach children about what they should look out for in other people that they know. So let's go back to strangers for a moment. We teach children not to go off with anyone that they don't know. If someone says to them, "Come to my car, I've got sweets," all of that, we teach children to never do that. However, we forget that children have a different perception of what a stranger is to what we perceive as a stranger. So for example, if a person came along dressed up as Spider-Man and walked up to a child and said, "Hi, I'm Spider-Man, do you want to come with me?" Spider-Man isn't a stranger, he's your friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man, so yes, I want to go with Spider-Man, and that will be okay because I know that Spider-Man is safe. Obviously, Spider-Man is not safe, it's someone in a costume, but it's that kind of idea that children don't always think of a stranger the way that we would think of a stranger. The same thing could happen when a stranger comes along with a dog or a puppy or something that the child really likes, because then the stranger doesn't seem like a danger. So, alongside telling your children not to go off with strangers, you must explain to them that if anyone, even someone they know, comes up to them and asks them to go somewhere, they must ask your permission first. So this includes people dressed up as Spider-Man, complete strangers with puppies, anyone, because if you have this kind of blanket rule, then that will help children because they don't really have to decipher between who is a dangerous stranger and who isn't. It's also important to teach children that adults will never go up to a child and ask them for help. A stranger might come up to a child and say, "Oh, my little boy just fell over and he's really upset. Can you just come and help me?" Adults will never just go up to a child in a park or anywhere and just ask them to help them with something. And if they do, they should be asking for the child's parent, not for the child's help. So that's another one you can teach your child so that if someone did say something like that to them, they would come straight to you. Something else you might want to consider is when children are being picked up from school or preschool or just anywhere that they're going, from a friend's house, who your designated picker-uppers are. So for example, when your child finishes school and they come into the playground to find whoever is picking them up, do they know who is allowed to pick them up? If they see your neighbour, oh, mummy's running late, I'm going to pick you up today. Oh, I know my neighbour, she's my mummy's friend, and they might go with that person because they know them. I'm not saying that you should be afraid of all of your neighbours or family friends, but it's very important to let your child know who they are allowed to be picked up by at school. So you might say, only mummy, daddy and grandma are allowed to pick you up from school. If anyone else comes, then don't go with them, go back to the teacher and say, someone else is here to pick me up. It can even be someone who they really know. It might be their aunt or their older cousin. And I'm not saying that those people are people that you are necessarily worried about, but giving a child just a set amount of people, a small set amount of people who are allowed to pick them up from school, gives them a clear idea in their mind of what is allowed to happen. Of course, things do change during the day. If you need to get someone different to pick up your child, you should make sure you always phone the school beforehand so that the school is readily equipped for this and can let the child know. Most schools do have a very strict policy in place. At my school, we had a very strict policy where if it wasn't the primary caregivers picking up the child, then we would have to phone the parent before we could let the child go with someone else. It might even be their grandfather, but if I, as the teacher, didn't know who that person was and hadn't had permission from the parent to let the child go with that person, then I would not let them leave with that child until I had permission from the parent. A lot of the time that just meant that the parent had forgotten, and I actually never had any case where the parent said, oh my goodness, no, I don't know why that person's coming. But those policies are in place for a reason. Of course, if there is someone in particular who you know you do not want to pick up your child, for example, when some children start school, we know that certain members of family aren't allowed to pick them up under any circumstances, and we are told about that by the parent before the beginning of the year or throughout the year if circumstances change. It's also important to let a teacher know if your child is going with another parent on a play date. So just because another parent has come to the classroom and said, oh, I'm taking Johnny and Elizabeth today, it doesn't mean I can let Johnny go with Elizabeth's mum, because I don't actually know if she is allowed to pick up that child unless their parent states it. Also, some looked after children or post-lac children, children who have been adopted, children who are being fostered, may have specific people who are not allowed any contact with them, and it's very important that you let the teacher and the school know about that as soon as you can. So to summarise, it is of course important to teach children about the dangers of strangers, but it's also important to teach them that people who they have already been acquainted with aren't necessarily allowed to look after them. Of course, we don't want children to be scared of everyone around them, so it's more important to tell children who is allowed to pick them up, who is allowed to take them to the park, to take them from the park, and to teach children the behaviours that they should expect from adults. So adults will never ask you for help. Adults will never ask you to go with them without your mummy or daddy's or caregiver's consent. That's just not the way that we expect grown-ups to behave. And if a grown-up does behave that way towards you, you should go and see mummy or daddy or whoever is looking after you at that time to make sure that everything is okay. And usually it is. Children should also know not to go off anywhere with any other children. So if they make a new friend in the park or on holiday, they should not go with that child unless they have got your permission. Because children to other children aren't really strangers. So it's very important to let them know that they cannot go somewhere with a new friend, with any friend, without getting your permission first. And obviously I want to stress that usually things are okay. Usually children do go to the park and don't have to worry about strangers, and neighbours do come up and talk to them, and it's fine because you're best friends with the neighbour and you know the neighbour's there with their own children. But we have to make sure that we protect our children against things that we may not expect to happen. If you found this video helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Please do let me know in the comments below if you have any tips about talking to your child about strangers. If you'd like to see more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and of course if you are already subscribed, you can click on the bell icon to make sure you get a notification every time I post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you next time.